all of us with the Business Sustainability Collaborative to just get your feedback and have a better understanding of student expectations for the event. But yeah, without further ado, Jen, if you would be so kind to maybe give us a little bit of a breakdown on your job title, your role, company, and we'll jump into it.
Thanks. Sure. So my name is Jen McFarland. I am a founder of a small company. I started the business in June of 2022, so we're a little bit past 2 years. And my company does it's it's kind of a big niche, is what I would call it, where we do technology and digital support, operational support for small businesses and teams. So we stay away from marketing and brand. We feel like there's a lot of other folks that do that, but we try to concentrate on being that partner for the digital and technical challenges that come along. So Google Workspace Administration, email authentication, and various web issues, DNS, things like that across the board that get a little bit more into the weeds of things, where maybe companies only have to deal with that every now and then, but they still need some support for that. And then also for some of the bigger things that are maybe ongoing items like security and privacy, that need a little bit more guidance. And then earlier this year, we completed our B Corp designation. So we got a certification. Very exciting. Thanks in large part to the sustainability team at NC State, the B Corp Clinic. And so yeah, we're extremely excited to have achieved that. And I think our take on it is a little bit unique from some other organizations because tech and sustainability are a little bit of strange bedfellows. When you talk about that, there tends to be more of a thinking of like, how can you use tech to be more sustainable? But we're also looking at is the tech that you're using sustainable or the companies that you're working with? So that's more than I intended to say, but I'll stop.
No, and thank you so much for that. We always like to get some information on where folks are coming from. With that, can you maybe just expand on, some of your academic history, maybe a degree path, internships or previous work, just to get an idea of, where you're coming from.
Yeah, so it's Wolfpack, baby. I went to NC State for undergrad. I have a degree in textile and apparel business management. So it's again with the niche. And then I have a master's degree also from NC State in technical communication. And so I had kind of gotten the sort of business, I akin that to actually a business degree with a minor in textiles. It's kind of what my undergrad wound up being. Um, and then the master's degree, I worked on that for like 5 years while I was working also at NC State in central IT. So I have almost 20 years in central IT at State, so OIT. And I did an array of things. I was in the communications office, but I was the lead for the web team that brought WordPress to campus. And then eventually I left NC State. Actually, before I did that, I was the product manager for ServiceNow on campus. And then I left the university and went and worked for a fully remote digital agency for about a year. 10 Up is the name of that. And that was an outstanding experience. That was like a legendary agency, but it was also an incredible amount of work. And the role that I had there was more of a project management role, which made me miss more of the hands-on tech stuff. So there were a few reasons for me to sort of make a shift, and I decided that the time is right for me to start my own company. So that brings you up to 2022.
Well, wonderful. And, we kind of covered a good bit of the sustainability with your company, but you had mentioned becoming a B Corp. And I was wondering if you might be able to kind of expand on that process. What exactly is a B Corp for those of us that aren't super familiar with that? And then maybe just some insights.
Sure. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, B Corp is I think the term conservative capitalism, compassionate capitalism is a little bit strange, but that seems to be the term that most people are familiar with. But basically, this is people who believe that business can be a force for good, and that's very much where I fall, is that term. And I did not know what a B corporation was when I started my business, but I started it very much with that mindset of business being a force for good. My husband is like very much a sort of cynic in that he believes that, all businesses are evil. And so I think part of that was me going into starting my business and being like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to do that. I don't want like some of the traditional agency kind of models where they're just working you to death, and I really, for me, I went to the BLD Southeast, which was a B Corp conference that took place at NC State in 2023. And by then I did know what a B corporation was, but going to that conference really sort of helped solidify for me the values and the people that were involved and the interests and their focus. And there was some talk at that conference, albeit kind of on the fringes, about sustainable tech. And so those were all things that kind of really focused me in that direction to get moving on the certification.
Well, wonderful, and thank you for that. And yeah, I guess we'll be jumping into the Q&A portion of tonight. And as always, we'll leave about 10 to 15 minutes open for student questions. So if you guys have any burning questions, please, we'd ask you to save them till the end, and hopefully remember them. But moving into it, you've had with our conversation here, you've had what seems to be a pretty long career experience in technology specifically. But what inspired your transition to move towards more sustainability in your work? And you kind of covered it, but maybe go a little deeper, I guess.
Yeah. So I kind of like very early on when I started my business, again, like I didn't know what a B corporation was, but I feel like I had that threaded through me early on when I started work and went searching for, for example, a hosting company. So I mean, among my other services, I help clients with their websites, and of course, I needed to host my website, and so I was already kind of into the web hosting sphere, and I wanted to do some really holistic research because it had been a while since I, did that, and I knew that I was going to be spending a lot of time doing hosting. So this is just an example, but like I went into that and did a lot of research, and if I recall that the focus of that research was very much on I wouldn't have called it green hosting at the time, but I was paying attention to, is this a good company? Do they take care of their employees? Are they being environmentally responsible? And so those were all things that led me to choose SiteGround as my hosting platform. And 2 years later, that's still working for me. I'm actually starting a new service for WordPress hosting and support, and that will be hosted on SiteGround because it is a 100% renewable matching company. And again, they take care of their employees. And so those were things that were important to me from the get-go. And then as I kind of went into it, it's that question that I had sort of underlying all my web and tech decisions when I was, encouraging someone to do something or looking at a service. I kind of always had in the back of my mind this question of, is this a good company? Are they doing right by people? Like, is this a good place for me to be putting my money? Like, I mean, I'm a business. I can actually be making decisions with my spend, and I want to make good decisions. I remember early on in my business in the fall of 2022, Elon Musk got Twitter. And I think my tipping point was when he had made some changes to their LGBT policy to be more exclusionary. And I was like, okay, that's it. And so I went off Twitter for my business and personally, and I was like, I'm just not doing that anymore. And I wrote something like, I'm not making waves in doing anything like that. But that, again, this was before there was a B Corp on the horizon. I was like, this is not where I want my business to be endorsing anything. So yeah, not on Twitter. Don't go looking for us there.
And you've sort of been talking about kind of an intentionality with the direction of the company. And have you found in your experience that it's well, maybe close some doors to larger opportunities in terms of either advertisement, like Twitter, for example, or do you find that the the pros outweigh the cons?
The pros at this point do not outweigh the cons. It's a challenge um, to try to make these decisions. In reality, the Twitter decision was felt like an easy one. Um, but it can be very difficult because tech is not worried about doing good. In case you haven't noticed, especially social media, they're not worried about being sustainable. This is not a place where they are pushing boundaries very often, unfortunately. So there's certainly times when I um, feel like there is not an option that I'm happy about. I also recently stopped using OpenAI after they got rid of their nonprofit status. And that was another example of, I had thought about doing it for a long time, but I kind of had to hold my nose and stick with it because OpenAI, at least at this point, their models are certainly kind of at the forefront of what AI is doing. But past a certain point, I decided that I would sort of go without that, and I've focused instead on using Gemini for what that's worth. Not that Google is a paragon of virtue, but they are more environmentally friendly and slightly more transparent than OpenAI. So, I mean, at this point, yeah, we're looking at little comparisons. Unfortunately, I would like to see things handled a lot better.
Oh, absolutely, and I appreciate that answer. And you kind of touched on just AI as an example, but while you're working in this digital space, how do you balance the draws of like more cutting edge technology like AI, for instance, versus trying to promote that sense of sustainability in your work?
Yeah. And I'm glad you asked because this is certainly something that I've thought a lot about, and I know that other people have too, especially in like sort of the B Corp or in a more values-based companies. You know, I firmly believe that AI is going to have a huge impact. It just is. And it's especially huge for small businesses. It's like getting an extra person, maybe not a whole extra person, but I mean, there's a lot of value to be had there. So yes, there's very much a balance of like, I know that it's wrong, but I'm still gonna use it. Um, and I think I said at one point, like, the only way I know how to reconcile this is I'm going to use AI, but I'm going to feel bad about it every time, which is a joke, but it's also like depressingly true. So I have instead sort of focused on trying to get as much information as I can so that I can keep trying to use more sustainable options. So to that end, and I can share some resources at the end too, but I recently, not that recently, but I have a website, a page on my website that has resources on it. And among other things, it has some resources that do assessment on the energy impact of different types of models. It also has a rating sort of system of the most ethical or like dangerous, the models that are that do more hallucinations than others. So I'm trying to put out there the information on which AI models at least are better than other ones. And the problem too with this, it's very tricky because it's going to ebb and flow, right? Some models will do better for a while, some will do worse. This is another sort of challenge of the dynamic nature of this industry. But keeping an eye on those things, I think is something that can help us all feel a little bit better about, again, putting the money behind whichever model we think is trying to do best by the circumstances and the tools that they have.
No, and I think that really brings up a valid point in regards to not only the energy usage, but some of the additional ramifications of AI usage. And it's tough to be as intentional as you can, while at the same time having to maybe make maybe accept certain aspects of it. But what I am curious about is, you brought up you have resources that you provided on your site, and you've done a good bit of research. So I guess for those KPIs or indicators that you're using to make a decision on what AI might be better or worse, how did you go about creating a list?
So To some extent, there's the list is made for you because you
Mhm.
have, there's like a limited number of options, at least when it comes to AI. The other things, there's unlimited options, and that's a problem. But if you're going to be using sort of a GPT-4 plus foundational model, you're really looking at like a Google, an OpenAI, an Anthropic, those kinds of options. And so from there, you can sort of look at the options that are available. And I will say that, like, for example, the energy assessment is really looking at the open source versions of models because, of course, they can't test, the underlying real models, so to speak. So it's not a perfect system, but you can at least start to get an assessment of like, all the open AI models that are available, what level of energy are they taking versus all the Googles, like let's do a comparison kind of thing. At this point, a lot of what is out there is somewhat subjective, and it does kind of require, what I kind of fall back on is um, let's look at the company as a whole and how reputable is it? What changes are they making? Are they leading the way in finding new solutions? Are they putting their money towards that? Um, different things like that. Um, I know some people don't love nuclear, but you've probably heard the news that Google is investing heavily in smaller nuclear plants that will give some energy for their models. I mean, I'm really in favor of that because it's showing them trying different things and sticking a lot of money into the system to try to get there, knowing that and this again may be something that the audience knows already, but a lot of the ways that companies try to offset their emissions is just to buy up more credits, and there's a limit, right? You can't just buy credits forever, and so it's kind of in some ways easy for a company to say, yeah, we're 100% carbon neutral if they've bought the credits, but are they out there finding new ways to get that energy problem solved? And so that's kind of the marker that I'm looking for, as opposed to am I sitting in a boardroom and not telling anybody what the contents of our agenda is? That's insightful in its own.
No, absolutely. And I guess kind of as a transition to a different topic, I guess outside of AI. I know it's a hot button issue, and thank you for kind of indulging me on those questions. But
No worries.
um,
It's a fun one.
for yeah, it absolutely is. And for for professionals that are working in tech, do you have any advice or any insights into making a transition towards more green tech or kind of on the sustainability tech side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's not an obvious thing. So saying uh, people working in tech is obviously a really broad swath of the population. But there certainly has to be deliberate effort, right? And it kind of comes from the people in many ways that are making the purchasing decisions. It's to me really encouraging to see more and more organizations creating roles for sustainability officers and bringing them into the process, especially again in the way of purchasing, because that's kind of where the buck stops, where you kind of enforce some of the important requirements, or where you can put requirements on that and then enforce it. Um, so it can be really tricky. What I get to do by working with small businesses and teams is just encourage like good habits out the gate. And it's not that every time I start working with a client that I'm like, hey, you know what you have to do? Sustainability, like let's get on it, right? That's not going to convert anybody. But where I can start to like sneak it in there, where I can say, hey, I'm going to provide this hosting, and I'm also going to plant 15 trees a year for your organization, right? Like little things that kind of get them mentally thinking, hey, we're doing more for the planet. Let's keep that going. Like, I don't know if that's going to make a difference. Check back in 10 years, but that's what we're trying.
Absolutely, and that doesn't go unnoticed. And I guess you're talking about working with business leaders and small businesses. Have you noticed any kind of transition in how they're viewing the additional work that you provide or the suggestions you provide? Are you seeing more of a shift towards sustainability?
Um, in the B Corp community, sure. In the not B Corp community, I don't. I don't frequently have people coming to me to ask for those things. What I see instead is um, a lot more of when you do put these things in front of them, they're like, hey, trees, that's great. I love that. Let's do that. Or, hey, I'm going to give you an assessment of the emissions of your website. And they're like, oh, like that's actually really important. I didn't know that that was such a big deal or that that played such a big impact. And I'm going to go, talk to my web people about this. Or, I mean, I think we should work on that. So I think a lot of it is like an ongoing, I don't think anybody's going to go out and Google for a sustainable technology support person. Like that's not a thing right now. I don't
Mhm.
think that's a series of keywords that come together. Um, but I think that hopefully over time we can start to have a shift of a mental model where that does become something that people start to use as, an adjective on some of the services they're looking for.
And have you found any avenues for educating business leaders on some of the opportunities they can pursue?
I love that stuff. I do offer, if you go to my website, I do offer training and it's a big, big piece. I actually, when I was looking for my B Corp certification, I really thought that I was going to be certified more for my focus on training and education because in particular, I find it really valuable to offer training for small businesses, specifically women-owned and minority-owned small businesses, because that's an area, particularly where it comes to tech, where they maybe don't have as much experience or as much comfort and aren't haven't had as many opportunities to learn those things. And so I really wanted to try to provide training to fill those gaps. And so yes, I do now also have a training that's on like green tech or sustainable tech. I have only offered it once. I offered it during the North Carolina Climate Week, but I am hoping that other people take me up on that so it can be sort of a topic that I can share.
No, and that has to be a great resource. By and large, what topics do you find that small business owners find the most helpful or get the most involved in?
When they come to my AI class, because I have two AI classes, actually I have a third one that's specifically about AI and SEO because AI has had a tremendous impact on the search engine optimization industry. But uh, the business users, if they're coming to an AI class, they're into it, right? However, I don't actually see as many small business owners as I would hope coming, paying attention to AI or doing AI training. I suspect that it's just a muscle that we're not used to flexing. And this is something where, like I read in Gallup a few weeks ago too, some stats on like 1 in 7 workplace users are using AI just because the rest of them aren't really getting advice from their supervisors about how specifically to use it, if they are being allowed to use it, right? So there's a lot of kind of obstacles to AI that mean that people aren't jumping on board that train as much as I would hope. But the users who are coming to class are very much like, hey, that's I can see this use case in my life. Um, and then the other classes that are popular, um, people who need to know about security and privacy are really excited to know about security and privacy, which sounds strange to say because nobody's really excited about security and privacy, but that stuff can be really important. So yeah, those are also classes that I offer.
And have you noticed any particular challenges that are cropping up for small business leaders now or small business owners, within the tech space or in your experience?
Um, it's kind of a thing that comes and goes where something will come up where a company will change, like last year it was Google phasing out uh, sort of classic universal analytics and shifting to GA4. And then earlier this year, there were changes to email authentication requirements such that people who were sending bulk emails started to have issues. And it's these kinds of things. People who are paying attention are needing to get cookie consent on their website or match, European Union or US laws with respect to data privacy. And so there tends to be there's a good number of clients who come my way a little bit in a panic, which is unfortunate. Like that's not how I want to get clients, but there tends to be these like sort of mini emergencies within the tech space where people are like, I do not know how to do email authentication. Like, and then that will oftentimes lead into other things that we're kind of cleaning up. But there are ups and downs, there are ebbs and flows to technology specifically that I think make it really nice to have a position, um, or have a partner, which is what I'm aiming to be for businesses, to have someone to go to when they need that help, when they're like, I just don't know what this means.
Well, and that's great to have you there for that. We've brushed on it a little bit, talking about the challenges and maybe some of the emerging technologies coming out, like AI, for instance. And I guess for you personally, how do you see the space you operate in evolving? And do you think that there's a place for sustainability in there?
I definitely think there's a place for sustainability. I don't think that people are going to pay less attention to sustainability in any industry. So just because I feel not alone, but certainly not crowded in the tech and sustainability Venn diagram middle piece. I think that's going to continue to like, people can only ignore the effects of climate change and, a lot of the other impacts that are affecting the world and also its people. They can only ignore those things for so long. And so I think to me, it is an obvious benefit for like innumerable reasons why you would be trying to achieve these goals for your organization, for your employees, why people would want to work for a company like that, why people would want to work with a company. So I don't have any concerns that's not going to grow. So if anything, yeah, I certainly think that hopefully over time that will lead to more interest and hopefully more companies like mine and more people available to sort of support organizations with these kinds of challenges.
And you know, we've talked about just kind of the wider implications of your role and your career, but um, I think maybe on a personal level, what do you think, or what do you see as being the most rewarding aspect of the work that you're doing now?
Um, there's a piece, I can't give you a quote because I read a book recently that was like talking about um, having impact um, and how you can do that and how it may feel like your impact is so tiny, but if you keep doing it, it will add up. And I think that is, again, particularly being in an area where, um, the impact of emissions from technology is not tremendous, but it's there and it can be improved. And so if I can keep trying to communicate that to people, if I can do better for that by like myself, maybe we can add that up to something that's more impactful. And that is the kind of thing that like makes me really proud of what I'm doing, makes me proud that I started my company, helps me sleep at night. Yeah, makes me feel a little bit better when I look at my kid. She loves trees, and I'm over here like, guess how many trees I plant a year? So many trees, kid. Like, let's look at these numbers. This is good stuff. Yeah. There's no downside there.
Well, and I think that's great to hear too. I think a lot of times in business, there isn't always a discussion of impact and well, how we see the world changing for the next generation. So I find that especially poignant to know that you're really taking into account what this might be or what you're leaving for your child. And so that's always huge to see. Um, and I guess back into the more personal sphere, if you had a chance to speak to your younger self, do you have any advice you'd want to give them, or anything that you'd tell them maybe not to do?
Like everything. It took me a long time to get to this point. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely I guess I would say I'm kind of a late bloomer in some ways. I also think that it's kind of strange, but obviously I had like some pause about starting a business at like 43, 44, Um, those are kind of daunting numbers. But I also don't know that if I spoke to my earlier self, um, that I got here for a reason. I learned some lessons. There were some tough years. Um, but I'm really happy with where I am. And I don't know. I also feel like as thin um, as this space of sustainable technology is now, it was even more thin, like 5 or 10 years ago. Like no one was talking about it. There was no data to be found. It's still hard to find data, but I can. Whereas I don't know that I could have even had much of an impact. I would have probably been looked at strangely if I was out there by myself 10 years ago or something. So I think things have come along the right way. It would have been nice to think that I could have started 10 years ago and we could have made that much more progress, but yeah.
Well, that's the kind of thing about hindsight, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I guess, as someone that started a small business or started their own business, I mean, do you have any advice for those of us that are considering it?
I would say that it's not for everybody, but I do think it's for everybody to try.
Could you maybe expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, there's no reason not to go create your LLC and give it a shot and see if you're enjoying the annoying stuff, or if you can, if you have a strong enough concept or interest in what you're doing that gets you to the point where you can hire somebody to do the stuff you really hate, like if you can hone in on your goals enough to get to the LLC is the easy part. There's no reason not to do that. If in fact, going back to your previous question, if I could have talked to 10-year ago me, I have a colleague who went off and started her own business about 10 or 15 years ago. And I had already been doing stuff on the side and I thought about creating an LLC and I didn't. And I sometimes wonder what would have been different if I would have moved into this direction sooner. Um, but there's no reason not to try to go down that road, get a little bit of paperwork in place, lean into that a little bit more. Maybe you lose your job and this is something that fills the gap. Maybe you find that you really hate your job and you're getting all your joy over here. Like there's no reason not to give that a shot.
Well, thank you for that. And I guess kind of more on a hopefully more of a fun note. I had seen some information in regards to a publication, and I just had some questions for you. If you could maybe expand on what or the role of WRAL TechWire is in the Triangle area.
Yeah. So WRL has a lot of sort of sub areas. If you've ever looked at their website or they have a really good app actually. They have lots of subsections with kind of niche reporting, which is great. Also a huge fan and donate a great deal to like ProPublica and Wikimedia and things like that because this is another piece that I'm very passionate about is the freedom like accurate and solid reporting that is paid for, right? Because it's a real challenge. WRL has a lot of different areas of local reporting, and one of them is TechWire. And TechWire is intended to cover obviously technology, but also startups. So it really looks at the business with like more of a close look at the startup community and small business and entrepreneurship community. And how a year and a half ago, I guess, I started writing for them. Um, my editor, who Rick Smith, if anyone knows Rick Smith, he started TechWire. It was initially an independent publication that was eventually bought by WRL, but he was their editor for many years, and he retired in December. And since then, TechWire has kind of fallen off some. I'm certainly not writing for them as much, and I really miss that coverage actually because I was certainly a TechWire reader before I was a writer for them. So but they have a lot of interesting things they're able to go. Like I'll be covering All Things Open next week if anyone's going to that in downtown Raleigh. So it's a good place to kind of check in on some of the news and goings on with respect to tech and startups.
Well, and thank you for that. It seems that you're plugged into a lot of different avenues. But I guess, do you have a favorite article that you've written for TechWire? I know that might be hard to
Mm.
ask, but I'm always curious when I, meet folks that are, both writing. So,
Yeah, I appreciate that question, and I have at least 70 or 80. It's more than that, I'm pretty sure. So that's a hard ask. But I I did one that is very relevant to the AI stuff that I do training for. One of my AI classes is called AI Every Day, where I talk about different types of prompts. And there's a lot of theory out there about what the different elements of a prompt are. And I have one extra element, a different, I mean, I don't know if I would say it's an extra element, but it's one that I don't typically see. And it's called motivation. And that is because there's uh, quite a bit of literature out there. Several articles and studies have been done, and more now even than when I wrote the article, that show that if you speak to the AI like it's a human, it will adjust its responses accordingly. So if you are polite to your AI, or if you ask, say please and thank you, if you ask in a positive way, or if you ask in like a really supportive way, like say you're really good at X, and then please give me, you will get better responses. Um, and then to the other side of that, there's been recent studies that show that if you introduce anxiety, if you like sort of threaten or intimidate the AI, you're going to get poorer and more biased responses. So the way that you talk to your AI is actually meaningful, and it should certainly be a consideration when you're crafting prompts.
well, for the record, I'm usually very polite when I talk to my
That's good.
AI.
I mean,
And
the underlying takeaway there should be that there's a reason why those things, why models respond that way, right? It's because of their training. And so they've seen things like please and thank you indicate better responses, and they've seen antagonistic behavior lead to worse responses, right? So we have to remember this is not a human, but it's modeled after a human. And if anything, I think it might be a good sign that it's seen enough pleases and thank yous to prefer that's the positive way that it is leaning. But it's still something to keep in mind that I think a lot of people aren't even aware of.
yeah, no, I don't think I've ever even considered that. At first, I'm not going to lie, as you were talking about it, I got a little alarmed.
Yeah,
But now having kind of that
yeah.
explanation, I don't know. I think that's just a really wonderful perspective. So I appreciate that.
One of the quotes in there was if you prompted with take a deep breath and think it through one step at a time. Again, you had more success with a term that said take a deep breath to a machine, right? Again, it's
Hmm.
very hard for people to like keep the humanistic tendencies away, and no wonder with success like that. It's weird.
Oh, wow. But yeah, no, Jen, thank you for putting up with my questions. And I think we'll open the floor to some of our listeners. And Rachel and Jessica, oh, should we shoot to have them through the chat, or do you think we could do it over microphone? Okay. Yeah, feel free. If anybody has any questions, the floor is yours.
Hey Jen, this is Taylor. First off, thank you so much. This has been really awesome. I want to ask you a little bit about how you made this shift to starting your own business. You were working for you said 20 plus years, and that's a big leap to take. So, what kind of pushed you? What were your feelings going into it? Yeah, I would love, some of your advice there.
Yes, my feelings going into it were something near abject terror. Um, I I was working for I appreciate your question, Taylor. Thank you. I was working for this 10up, this fully remote digital agency, and I actually gave them 3 months notice, which I wouldn't normally say everybody can do, but because of the nature of the work, it was very planned out. So I knew that I could finish up some projects. And so that gave me a bit of a runway, which was nice. Again, like there's not a bad time to start your business. So like I had incorporated my business in February of 2022. And then my first day of being unemployed, which is how I thought about it when I sat down at my desk. My first day of being unemployed was in June. And I remember when I sat down, I was like, well, I guess I should go update LinkedIn. And when I went over to LinkedIn, I saw someone had posted, and I'll leave the details off, but it was someone at the university who I had worked with before, and they were looking for someone to fill a role doing WordPress and ServiceNow, which I had had experience with both. And I was like, okay, I could do this job in my sleep. Like, I could just do that job. Like, I don't have to start this business. And so I did go and apply for the job. And I knew that there were things that had made me leave the university. There were reasons why I wanted to do my own thing. One of them being that my daughter was about to start kindergarten, particularly working with West Coast clients with this agency. That was a real challenge in terms of like, hey, it's like, I know it's like 1 o'clock for you, but I got to go get my kid. So I knew that it needed to be flexible. So I had written a cover letter where I was like, hey, like, let's maybe see if we can make some things work. The good news is that NC State is extremely slow with their HR. And so by the time they got around to getting back in touch with me, I was more confident. I was feeling better. I knew what I wanted to do. And the good news is I was able to turn the work that they needed into a project that I was able to do for Merit Digital. So that was like a double thumbs up. That was a good day. So yes, the answer to your question was I was very intimidated, but there were plenty of reasons, both for my family and for me personally, to think that this was a good time for me to try this. I will also say I'm very lucky that my husband has health insurance, so I don't have to worry about that piece, right? Like we had money saved so that we knew that we could get into this to try this. That is like there's plenty of reasons to say that I was in a good place to think that I could make this work. So, but that can be a challenge for some people too.
That's really wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
I have another one if nobody else has a question. I want to know because you mentioned, recommending a lot of sustainable options to some of your clients. Do you find that small businesses, though, have a harder time affording, more sustainable tech options, especially as, trying to meet the bottom line early on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Because yes, sometimes those things can be more expensive. I think what I have not really seen very much of in tech is like a fully committed sustainable option. Um, so like I imagine that trying to find a fully sustainable AI model, for example, or a fully sustainable, task manager or something like that, that they would be, if they were making that focused effort, that there would be an upcharge on that. Whereas when you're looking for sustainability or green tech with businesses now, you're kind of looking for at the underlying things. You're looking at the company, you're trying to establish if they're um, if they're a company making good decisions, you're trying to establish what their hosting is. So then if they have green hosting. You're, trying to establish some of the other underlying factors to make those decisions. There's not very many organizations that are coming to you saying, I'm doing green tech and there's a premium on this. So that is kind of for a benefit. There are some, like I've chosen SiteGround for several reasons. One, obviously, being that it is 100% renewable energy supported. Um, and there are other tools out there that offer those kinds of things. There's actually another tool that's like 300%. But that one is I think it's about the same price as SiteGround, but it doesn't have as many of the benefits, and it doesn't have as much like site reliability. Their CDN isn't as broad. Like some of the other underlying tech isn't to that level. And so again, like that's the other thing that you're doing, right? Is you're comparing that green tech, and as long as they're still meeting the needs of the client. So that also kind of like allows you to hone in on what you actually need, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I think it's about like, you were providing like a lot of the research, right? And so then
Yeah.
it's makes it a little easier for your clients to say, hey, I can just choose this solution and know that I have the sustainable option. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of users, it's they do just feel better knowing that they are just even trying to have somebody else do their homework, right, for them. Just having somebody else pay attention.
Awesome. Thanks.
Well, all right. Unless anybody has any other questions. Well, okay. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And as kind of at the top of the session, Rachel would have just posted a link to a survey, and we all kindly ask if you could just fill that out, and that helps us to better improve the process, and hopefully get this down to a better rhythm. So, but yeah, thank you everyone, and hope you have a great rest of your evening.
I just put the link in for the resources page if anyone's interested.
Absolutely, and thank you, Jen.
Yeah.